You might have seen this picture floating around on Twitter for a little bit after the Modern Warfare beta went live, and yeah, when you take this picture and show it to a normie, they will believe that this map has too many angles of exposure and is overwhelming. I mean, just look at all these red circles. All of these places are places you can get killed from. Now when I saw this, I was a little facetious about it, first saying I love it with an emoji, then saying it looks like hell, and I was just kind of playing around with it because it's so silly. But this picture actually got a lot of traction, and people aren't even talking about it the way they should be talking about it. See, people were hung up on this picture because it's a picture. It's a static image. And for some reason, when we see a static image, we forget that it's a video game that's constantly in motion, and since it's Call of Duty, it's in rather quick motion. First of all, studying this picture really gives a good indication of what I mean. If you look up on the minimap, you can see that all of the enemies on the team look like they're on the right side of the map. Now this is because there's a UAV up and that's why he can see that, but still, there is an entire enemy team on the right side of the map. So all of these left circles are irrelevant. And you're thinking, well, yes, in this moment, but that's actually a really good point. Maps aren't a place where somebody's going to be somewhere all the time. People are constantly moving. In this current circumstance, players are not on that entire left side of the map, and in most games, they're going to be on one side or the other, whether at the far end, on the right flank, or the left flank, or even where he, in the picture, is standing. I think it's also fair to point out that he doesn't need to be standing there. This reminds me an awful lot of a map in Call of Duty Ghosts that I think is called Warhawk, and that's that little town map with a street that goes right down the middle and there's a building on each end. This gives me those vibes like a lot, right? And this has maybe a couple more angles where you can get shot from. It's very comparable to that map. And nobody in their right mind would stand at the end of that street without any cover. So you're never going to be, unless you're really dumb, you're never going to be in a position where you're going to stand out in the open at the end of a street with no cover, especially when you know that there's several windows and rooms and buildings you can get shot from. This wasn't an issue for people back in Modern Warfare 2, Call of Duty Ghosts, Modern Warfare 3, maps that had complexity, buildings, and lots of windows, and lots of little areas you can get shot from, and flank routes, and just overall size, scale, and depth. It wasn't a problem for people back then. Yeah, it does encourage camping, but not every Call of Duty gets to play at the same pace. Sorry, this one might play a little bit slower, and sorry, it might not be as predictable. That's, kind of the price of variety in a shooter. Another thing you can quickly point out is that you can do this with every Call of Duty map with any sort of decent size or scale. Mostly throughout the Modern Warfare series, Call of Duty Ghosts, but also in games like Infinite Warfare and Black Ops 3, even though it's gonna be kinda hard. You see, a lot of Call of Duty games started doing this special practice of forcing engagements to the point that it's ridiculous, at least in my opinion. Making sure that you never have too much distance between yourself and the end of a lane, and making sure there's cover everywhere, so all of your engagements fall within like 10 to 25 meters max. But I digress. One of the things I also want to point out about this picture is look at this left side. Look at this giant ass circle. I didn't even notice this until making this video. There's a giant like red line on the left side of the screen here, and I wonder if he's trying to indicate that he could get shot from that area. That's literally every engagement, any place you can stand at any FPS game other than the inside of a tiny building in a corner of a room. Yeah, you could highlight the edges of your screen as a place where you may get shot from. What are you on? That is not an important thing to point out. Oh, by the way, the entire this side of the map that's outside of my peripheral vision, I could get shot from there. No kidding. Also, though, if you look on his right on the minimap, there's a wall with a gap. Now, I'm not talking about the door that's in front of him that's actually highlighted in the picture. I'm talking about the gap that's near the wall next to him. I don't know why he doesn't highlight that, at least on the minimap or something, because that's clearly where the enemies are coming from, and if they're going to get him, they're going to come from around that tank, which is kind of a lazy circling job. Maybe there's a window or a door down there that I don't know about, but that's just a tank. So, like, clearly they could just come around that area, but they could also come around the other side of the tank too, so whatever. But either way, so yeah, the tank, the broken down car, the door and the window at the end of the street is pretty much the only places he has to worry about. And that window at the end of the street seems like it doesn't give the enemies much cover. It looks like just a giant fucking hole in a wall. So maybe I wouldn't worry about that too much, because they'd have to be just as in the open as you are in this picture. Now, when I say you are, I'm talking about the person that took this picture and posted this tweet. This person, who goes by the name Chris, or @IceWalls, says, "This is why I do not like the level design in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Enemies can be too many places at any given time. It's impossible to master a map where you have to account for 10 different areas at any given point in a match." Now, if you want to detach the dynamic circumstances of how a map actually plays from how the map is actually designed in order to make your point, that's fine, Chris, but I'm not going to let you get away with it. Like I already pointed out, even in the match that you're in when you took this picture, you didn't have to worry about that entire left side, and likely you are not going to have to worry about every circle on this picture at every given moment. Even if you were to do a 20v20 on this map in particular, I doubt you'd have to worry about the enemies being on one side of the road and the other side of the road unless your team is the most incompetent team that's ever existed. That would be 100% map control on their part, and they're probably also not going to hang out in those circled areas and just wait for you to stand in the middle of the open unless you keep making a habit of that, in which case, Chris, that's on you. Now you say that's why you don't like the level design. Fine, you don't like the level design because people could be somewhere even though they're probably not going to be, and even in your picture they're not, but whatever. Enemies can be in too many places. Yes, enemies can be in too many places. I know that people that were a fan of Black Ops 2, and even Black Ops 2 had maps that were a little bit more complicated, like Yemen or Turbine, but whatever. Fine. Enemies can be in too many different places. I know in Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare and in some maps in Advanced Warfare, it was really nice how it limited all of your engagements to be within that like 10 to 25 meters and made sure there was cover surrounding you constantly so that you couldn't get hit from too many angles. But that is a type of map design that you don't actually need to master because there's so little variables. You can't say that it's impossible to master a map where you have to account for 10 different areas when that's how you master a map. Tell that to a Battlefield player. Oh, it's impossible to master a map because they can be in 10 different areas. No, that's what requires you to master the map. You shouldn't be standing here at the end of the road dealing with all of these potential points. You should be flanking. You should be using these points against your opponents. That's mastering the map, something that COD players have unfortunately forgotten how to do. Some people just aren't used to power positions and complexities, long lines of sight, and many variables on certain streetways like this, but you'll learn. I mean, people succeeded in Modern Warfare 2, in Call of Duty Ghosts, and Black Ops 1, games that had messy, torn up maps with lots of places for enemies to hide. And those games didn't have all of the movement mechanics that Modern Warfare has, and they had a lower tick rate and a number of other technical blunders like peer-to-peer only. I'm not saying that because an old COD did it, it's good. No, some designs are just outdated for sure. But if you're going to build up an unbelievable scenario to justify the reason you don't like the level design, you're going to say that enemies can be too many places when they're obviously not going to be all those places all the time, and you should be able to read the map and see where your teammates are and figure out where they are and where they aren't. In fact, in this picture, I can see the outline of your teammate on the left side. In fact, if those little blue dots are your team, then you can just see right here that the enemies can't be everywhere. You can see where your teammates are, and on the minimap and compass, you can see where the enemies are. You might have felt smart posting this, and if you were one of the people that saw this and retweeted it and liked it, you might have felt smart liking and retweeting it, but you have to take out so much context in order to look at just somebody standing in the open, in the middle of the street, on any FPS map, and circling all of the areas they could be shot from. You're not supposed to stand in the open at the end of this street. Your teammates have the left side locked down. The right side that the enemies could come from clearly have less variables in terms of, your likelihood of death. And I would hope that you would be moving. I would hope that you'd be flanking them and using these positions against them. When you look at a static image like this, you forget that the game actually plays. And so you forget that you actually have to play the game. You can't just take one screenshot and justify a dislike of a level design that doesn't hold your hand and limit all of your engagements for you. Maps like this, and this map could be terrible, I don't know, But maps like this usually require you to control your engagements depending on your class, loadout, and playstyle. You don't have to play Modern Warfare to see the ridiculousness of this post. You would just have had to have played and thought about, Halo, Doom, Titanfall, any other Call of Duty game, Battlefield game, any shooter. Any shooter. You can stop on a position of a map and circle all the areas you can get shot from. And some maps will have less, and some maps will have more. But I think the developers thought you might play the map and take into account the context of the match you're in. But maybe they expected too much. So this tweet has been deleted. I'm glad that my Twitter on mobile didn't refresh and reset, and update. So it still showed this tweet as being available, but obviously on the bottom of my screen here it said failed to load tweet. And I'm sorry I used this font on my phone. I selected it and I'm too lazy to change it back. It's kind of an obnoxious font. But anyway, I hate to ask a loaded question, but what do you guys think of this incredibly intellectually dishonest picture? Yeah, anyway, see you when I see you guys. Goodbye.